Hey, this is Sabrina Monarch of Monarch Astrology and Magic of the Spheres podcast. In this episode, I'm going to be bringing you a forecast about Mars and Cancer. So, generally, Mars and Cancer, because I haven't gotten to talk to you about this yet, as well as the aspect that Mars is making this week to Saturn and Pisces, the trine. But Mars and Cancer is a big topic at the moment astrologically because, due to the upcoming retrograde of Mars, Mars is spending a very long time in Cancer in particular. Mars entered Cancer on September 4th and will ultimately leave Cancer April 18th, 2025, with around 2 months in the middle, November, December, that we will have Mars in Leo, retrograding from Leo, going back into Cancer. And so what I'm going to talk to you about is relevant for this week, but also I'm talking about something that is really going to be thematically important for some months. This is something that we can really start to have a deeper learning process around. So the first thing, please like this video, leave a comment at some point and let me know what resonates with you, and subscribe to my channel. The, energetic, I just want to introduce Mars in Cancer. And there's a really specific energetic that came to me from my own experience and meditations and reflections. Mars is, we know as like a planet of energy, vitality, aggression, war, violence. There's something instinctual, impulsive, outward moving, forceful, energized about Mars. So in, whatever dose we're working with Mars, because it's also that energy that gets you up out of bed. It's the fire that's cooking your food. It's the knife that's cutting your food. So there can be of course, a medicinal side to Mars, and also a very challenging, deeply uncomfortable, painful side of Mars. And I'm thinking about Mars as like the energy that pierces us in life, right? It's a penetrative planet. You might know that I love the myths of Eros and Psyche. So I think about, Cupid, Eros' bow is like literally piercing people, creating intense sensation, right? The affliction of passion. These are all kind of Martian things. And I'm mentioning that because, this angle of like the piercing quality of Mars, because then let's put that in the sign of Cancer, right? And Cancer is about our internal life. Cancer is ruled by the moon. Cancer is about safety and home, and a lot about how we protect ourselves emotionally, how we defend ourselves emotionally, how we nourish and care for ourselves. The energetic that I was feeling into with Mars in Cancer was, what about when something, pierces, and then instead of it going through, like Mars stereotypically, or like Aries maybe as like a Mars ruled sign, it's known to be quick to anger and then quick to get over it, right? It's not holding it after. Quick to have the confrontation, quick to forgive, maybe, for Aries. Cancer is more orbital and it loops. So you get that piercing irritation, Mars, the inflammation, the insult, the energy, right? And then it circles and loops around with Mars and Cancer. And this is tricky because Cancer can relate to our ego, our personality, right? And so if something enters our awareness, like an irritation or something, that energy, that piercing quality of Mars, and it just eddies and loops around, that's creating rumination, resentment, crustiness, crabbiness, like all of that kind of stuff. It's also really adding energy to our egoic constructs, right? So this is like, I'm pointing maybe to the energy of what is petty, right? As a starting point, because not everything in this transit, not everything in our lives will be petty. But by that, it's like when we're upset about something small, right? Or there's a deeper location of hurt, there's a deeper thing that's being touched, but we're latched onto the story layer of it. The way that person looked at me, what they said to me, like, how dare they, right? Or like getting really in the story and like looping around and ruminating on it. There is no transformation being had in that. It's consolidating the ego, it's consolidating the personality and creating the same problems over and over again. Maybe you've met this type of person also who has like a story that they repeat about how everyone's let them down or fucked them over. And they're like the victim over and over again with different characters. And you can see like quite clearly that it's not all these other people. It's that they keep playing out the same personality role and they're unconscious of it. And they're continuing to defer the blame and responsibility to the situation, the other people, and so on. So that is the risk to me of Mars in Cancer, is it's energetic of the circular irritation, right? That just kind of loops around and animates the chambers that it's looping around in without there being an emotional breakthrough. On the other hand, at a higher side, you can have Mars in Cancer really relating to emotional courage, a willingness, Mars, to be with the internal world, to be with emotion, and to, follow a emotional impulse to the place of change. Mars also being an agent of change. So what I'm thinking is like, what if during this transit, these moments that we are irritated or find ourselves in something petty or find ourselves in something that we can't, get over, that this becomes a moment to wake up inside of the lucid dream. So I want to share a story with you. There's something about like, I had this experience. It had a lot of charge for me, and it was also like fairly petty, fairly insignificant. And that in the life of a writer, sometimes you'll have an experience and you're going to write about it later. And it's like, it's obnoxious to ourselves that we do that. We're like, okay, this one's happening. But I really sourced a lot of information, meditation on Mars and Cancer because of an experience that I had. So I'll tell you the shortest version of it that I possibly can, which is that there's a restaurant near where I live. And here in Greece, there's like flirtation is different than I'm used to in the States. It happens way more just out in the world. And yeah, I've been like navigating or understanding that in the months that I've lived here. Also, at the moment, I'm specifically not dating, but I wasn't prepared in some sense to be flirted with and then navigate like, oh, I'm not dating or no thanks. Like my MO is just to be like, sure, and like then not follow up. So I would actually, that's a very Cancerian actually to be indirect. I take pride though in also being direct, being honest, getting to that moment where I can have that emotionally honest confrontation. It doesn't necessarily happen if I'm just caught off guard because I wasn't expecting this encounter with the waiter. Anyways, we had just chatted casually about things, tattoos, whatever, at different times that I've come to this restaurant. But this time he asked me for my Instagram, or he gave me his and said we could get coffee sometime. And I'm not thinking that there's necessarily anything there. But I agree to exchange Instagrams. I follow him, his like private account, so I request it. And then later, some hours later, he added me back and accepted my follow request. Then within a few minutes, unfollowed me, made his profile private again. And I'm like, interesting. What about my profile? Was it the fact that I'm an astrologer, all these things I'm talking about Pluto and Eros and death? Like, all right, he's not into it. That's fine. I didn't go back to the restaurant for a few weeks, but I imagined that when I did, I could simply make a joke about it because I think it was really strange. But when I encountered him at the restaurant and I came with a friend, he had this huge armor up. There was nowhere to get through to make a joke or whatnot without me feeling like I was being invasive or something. Um, the sudden closure, the way that he pretended like he didn't know me, um, comes by with wine, runs away. Later in the night, he wasn't like the main waiter. There was a group of them. He asks my table, "How is everything?" But he's looking diagonally, and I look up and see him just purposely avoiding my gaze. I was enraged, not even necessarily at like a conscious, like, oh, I'm mad kind of thing, but just my body heated up. And I wanted to just like confront him, like, what is your problem with me? Right. Like, I was upset. I was more upset than I wanted to be. I was feeling quite reactive. And then I'm sitting with that, right, for that moment of time. But even the next day, I was still upset about it. I was going so far in my fantasy mind about like writing a letter or something. I was like, damn, why am I so upset about this? Because this is honestly kind of dumb. And see, in this, to make it a universal teaching moment, not just my own dumb story, um, like we can recognize that some of these things are not important or they're petty, and then just basically mentally use an amount of force to compartmentalize it of like, I don't let myself be bothered about such things. But what if that's not true? What if you are just annoyed or irritated about something? So I sat with it. I thought about it in a very energetic way of like, what is this experience that happened in my life, right? I had an encounter with someone that heat came up in my body. I was angry and now I'm ruminating about it. What is this about? What is this wanting to touch internally that has absolutely nothing to do with this person who I really don't know and was not invested in getting to know? Um, that, right, started so inside of wondering, why is this upsetting me, whatnot? And I start to see the places that it's touching or triggering or whatnot. I thought about Mars and Cancer and suddenly I was like, had an aha moment of the sideways gaze, right? The sudden evasiveness, the sudden defense, the sudden closure, it all felt very Mars and Cancer in some sense, the avoidance. Um, and I noticed also that there was like a thread that had me reflect on of suddenly seeing through this filter of where do I feel attuned to and met? Where do I feel neglected and abandoned in this moment, in my history and whatnot? And those are all very Mars and Cancer types of concerns. Why I wanted to use this story as a teaching tool or a teaching example. Um, and I had like these weird little like, I don't want to talk about this, or like, why am I sharing this? Like for some reason I have like insecurity about even talking about it. Um, I wanted to share it because it's very easy with these kind of Mars and Cancer experiences, or the ego itself. Like, and I connect Cancer with the ego. That's very difficult, like kind of upsets people or something. But just to clarify why I do that, Cancer is home, right? And the ego is a literal home for the soul. Like just like the body is a vessel or is like a home for the soul in some sense, our ego and our personality is an interface through which we navigate the world. And just like you can move the furniture around in your home, or you can like care for your home, or like the way that your home is set up influences your experience of it, our personality and our ego is not like the end all be all of who we are, but we can get very calcified or stuck or limited inside of our ego. So, ego is not about thinking that you're the shit, having a big ego or something like that. Ego are just personality structures. People can be just as inflated and have huge egos, but they think they're the worst person in the world, right? And like have like a shame structure to their ego. The ego is just the structure of your personality, the structure of your consciousness in this particular incarnation. And it is the home for your soul, right? It is the vessel, the vehicle through which you are moving through life and evolving. And sometimes your ego gets so destroyed in this life, right? You have these ego deaths, and sometimes you need a healthy ego, right? You need a healthy sense of self and a boundary. Like the ego literally is a boundary that separates you from just melting into the everything, right? And not having a sense of self. So the thing about when our ego gets upset about something of like, why did this waiter act like I don't exist? Like, why was he so rude to me? Right? Like that, that can be compelling. That can be enough, right? Like that could have been my drama to snack on like popcorn for the day, to, call a friend. I had this weird experience, right? Like I could have gotten so, I mean, clearly there was charge in it enough that it's motivated this whole discovery. The thing about it though is that I was not okay with just circling that irritation at that level. I didn't like the fact that I was ruminating about it the next day. I didn't like what that meant about me or whatever, whatever. So I had to follow down why was I so pissed off? What was for me inside of the experience? Then it triggered this whole reflection on Mars and Cancer, this deeper process. And the original trigger is not something, it's diffused. What I think can be so immensely then cathartic or creative about Mars and Cancer is having this ability to follow the energy and let it lead to a breakthrough, let it lead to a disruption of ego, as opposed to feeding with all that vitality of Mars, the very structure of the ego, so that you're just looping in the same story and having the same problems over and over again. So back to my notes. Essentially, I'm pretty certain, my guess, my prediction is that Mars in Cancer, the transit will have little moments like this, um, of being irritated, of being agitated, right? Of feeling emotionally reactive, feeling emotionally irritated. And that, what if the thing that we're upset about, might on the one hand be valid to be upset about. It might be a kind of reciprocal input output situation, but sometimes the reaction actually is touching a much deeper internal matrix, right? It's touching a deeper wound or a pain point, and then the situation comes out sideways. What I think is important to cultivate with Mars in Cancer is a deeper emotional courage around connecting with, being with neglected and unpleasant parts of ourselves, taking responsibility for what is ours to be with, as opposed to using the energy of Mars inside of these agitating experiences to nurse our hurts, to nurse our wounds, point our fingers and blame, and then circle around inside of the same old story, which is, a potential. Another, note on this is that like children have really big emotions, and it's the job of, their parents or caretakers to, reflect back like a way to, help them stabilize inside of those emotions, that it's okay to be sad, it's okay to be angry, it's okay like that you're so excited and enthusiastic. And this isn't always perfect. People don't mirror people perfectly. But these are kind of habitual things that happen in the home of like in one family, maybe it's okay to be sad and melancholic, but you can't be angry. That's bad. Or in another family, you can be angry, you can be fiery, but don't show weakness, don't be sad, right? Like whatever the conditioning is of the family matrix, it can then create like these inside of the developing ego or personality of the child, like what emotions are, have a really clear passageway, like it's just okay, that emotion can exist. Um, this can also be about excitement and happiness. Like if you feel okay to express yourself and your joy, or if you feel like you're supposed to dim it down or hide it, like whatever the emotion is, if you feel safe being in it and expressing it, if you feel safe simply holding it in your body. And our personality is connected to these kinds of wiring. So if you have that piercing energy of Mars coming through and circling around in our personality ego matrix, like labyrinths, it's basically the energy is going where the energy is allowed to go. The energy is going where the energy is familiar with going. And that's only going to change if we're willing to disrupt those patterns. And inside of disrupting those patterns, we can be quite uncomfortable because we're literally sending energy or allowing energy to move to a place that doesn't exactly feel safe. So in terms of, children having big emotions and adults ideally mirroring and supporting and stabilizing that, we don't outgrow that need in our adult lives to be with like what is. The issue is that as adults, we've already developed these ego structures and these personalities that might in many ways be designed to prevent us from touching certain material, prevent us from feeling certain things, right? That we go into these kind of default personality ego channels to protect something that didn't feel safe in our earlier environment, right? Something that wasn't, safe in our earlier environment, maybe something that disconnected us from love, maybe something that created punishment or consequences that we did not want to have. So we avoid and sidestep certain things because we just don't feel safe, right? But then in later in life, a lot of these things are not inherently unsafe. It's not inherently unsafe to be angry. It's not inherently unsafe to feel joy, right? It's just if we've habituated ourselves or have this conditioning that it is. So I really think Mars in Cancer might be showing up to kind of pressure point, trigger some of these deeply uncomfortable emotional spots, and then we react. We're inflamed. It creates an inflammatory response. And the question is, are we going to take it so literally as this person, this situation upset me, or are we going to look inside at the thing that is being activated, which I think is where the real kind of power or deeper medicine of this transit will come to. So how did that land for you so far? Leave a comment, let me know, maybe pause the video. I'm going to gather myself for a moment here. The next thing that I'm going to be talking about is the trine to Saturn in Pisces. And so even though this is influence for, it's September 30th that this transit is happening, I wouldn't go so far as to say it wouldn't be part of the whole retrograde story. So I wouldn't just locate it to the week. Saturn and Pisces. Really have been sitting so much with this one lately inside of the, grounding the dream or learning how to be a dreamer in a effectual way. And one of the main things that I've been talking about on this channel, as well in relationship to that is this spiritual process of being with what is, right? Like dropping into the current experience. What are my body sensations? What's happening? As opposed to dissociating and not being here, which dissociation can be a personality structure that's designed to protect, right? It's like, I don't want to be here. I'm going to go somewhere else, right? Or I'm going to cultivate a life somewhere else in my imagination. But when it comes time to reintegrate, right, to live your best life, live your dream life, it requires a level of presence on the ground. And so it also brings up the question of every little moment that we're inside of. Are we here? Are we fighting it? Do we have a problem with it? Is it wrong? Right? And maybe even if it is misaligned, maybe if our reality is in need of shift, are we in acceptance that that's our experience? So that's been kind of a Saturn and Pisces energetic that I want to name. I also want to shout out the Dream Mommy, Ari Felix. I had a reading with them last night, and I'd had this piece of writing already written. I added some edits, and I wanted to acknowledge that I'm really inspired by that conversation. It was a reading about embodying your chart ruler. And I had like a really brilliant, just transcendent conversation with them about dreaming. And yeah, I want to cite them as an influence for some of these ideas, especially around the idea that, our dreams have a reality to them. That there is like a clunk, like a Saturnian element to our dreams. And that we're also having this maturation and growth process inside of that dream, right? How to live that dream. And the various kind of like conflicts and deep, painful initiatory experiences that we go through in relationship to that dream, right? Very also similar to maybe where things are on the line for Mars and Cancer, is that we just care. Like, what do you care about so deeply that it hurts? And especially also in relationship to dreams, right? I think about this often through the lens of Pluto, and I'll talk about like process psychology and high dream and low dream, but this way that like our soul dreams up these peak experiences in our life that are both positive peak experiences, like the dream realized, and also negative peak experiences, our nightmare, right? Our fear that we're losing the dream or that we'll never have it. And so that's kind of like the web that we're inside of. And so when I'm thinking about Mars and Cancer, Trine, Saturn, and Pisces, I'm really thinking about how there's something that's being cut through at the moment. And that it's our fantasy ideals of should, what life should be, who we should be, who others should be, right? And the way that this is creating an immense amount of emotional pressure. And inside of that emotional pressure, even like a victimization, either like I'm a victim or I'm a persecutor, persecuting what's wrong in the world, or I'm a rescuer, saving the world from the wrongness of it. This is known as the victim triangle: the victim, the persecutor, the perpetrator, and the rescuer or the savior, right? So when there's a really strong fantasy ideal of should, it can constellate that. And inside of this, we're still perhaps needing to discern what is actually real versus how enmeshed we are with these fantasy standards. So, for example, because sometimes when we think about giving up an ideal, it seems like really deflated or sad. But sometimes giving up ideals can be really relieving because these ideals have become tyrannical, actually. So, or they're just off. They're not in connection with what's happening. So a few examples of fantasy-oriented standards: we could falsely believe that we should be smaller energetically, that we should be less inconvenient, right? Like take up less space, that we should just contort ourselves in some way. We could falsely believe that a person in our lives is handling their initiations in their life falsely, like that they're doing it wrong, and that we know the way for them and that they're failing. You see how that sets up the persecutor also, and the inner victim of like, I'm having to watch them flail. Why won't they listen to me? Like, whatever it is. We might think our appearance should be different. Glamour magic, of course, is coming up. We might think that some difficulty in our life should be easier. All of these things can be subtle, right? But there's just this idea, the tyranny of the should. And the issue that I want to point to inside of that is the unconscious entanglement with the judgment, right? To just think it's real. I'm right. This person is doing it wrong. I'm right. Right. Or like, I really should look this other way. I really should be different, etc. The level of friction inside of so deeply believing the judgment that we're simply fighting our reality every step of the way instead of accepting our grief, our frustration, our discomfort, and starting from there, right? Like, what if you just sit with the density of the deflation and the disappointment as opposed to using, well, I'll just be perfect. I'll just be like the best. I'll just whip other people in my life into shape so that I don't have to deal with who they are. Like whatever it is, it's like trying to like make reality something really elevated to avoid feeling some oceanic kind of grief. I'll put that there. Let's pivot. I'm going to approach this from a different direction. People are generally able to act upon standards different than ideals, right? With a certain level of inner authority and like no frills drama about it, of like, no, this is not for me. No, thank you, right? No drama, just like I'm a no. And then moving on, right? Like this is not, it could be like if you have like a standard for like how you live, right? Like the kind of housing or something that you're willing to live in, and you have that, ability, that, resource in your life. And that's kind of like your this can, like, how do I get to that thread? Sometimes people's like financial situation or economic situation is happening at a level that's like below their standard for themselves, where it's just like I'm not even in a situation that's okay with like what I need. And let's say you're like looking for apartments or something like that, and you're like looking at houses and you see something that's like clearly just like really really not where you want to live. Like there's things about it that are really off to you. And if you can just clearly be like, no, let's go look at something else. Or if you like look around at the house and you're like, I guess this is all I can have. And you just like kind of surrender into the fate of it. And you're feeling really melancholic and sad and messed up about it. Another example of that is like, if someone is treating you in a way that you don't think is okay, and instead of just removing yourself from the situation or adjusting it or navigating it as adults accordingly, or someone that you can't even reason with, right? What if you end up spending days, weeks, months, years agonizing over the relational dynamic, begging the other person to treat you better, doing everything you can to appease them, to have them treat you better? This is fighting the the standard, right? It's like, it's not a standard yet. It's like, I can't help but interface with this. And there's like a wound cycle that's happening inside of that. It's like the part of the grief stage known as bargaining. Like you're trying to argue with the situation from a place of not having accepted it yet. And this is something that can keep people enmeshed in, toxic or otherwise unaligned situations for a lot longer than they need to be or, need to be. Because they're not just fighting the situation itself. It's like there's a deeper reality matrix or it's touching on some deeper wound. And for whatever reason, they haven't been able to slice through it yet. And so it's lingering around and it's like, I'm not okay with it, but I'm still willing to be with it. This was a hard thing for me to like really pin down and like write about clearly, so bear with me. But what I'm trying to say is how much circular fighting and looping Mars in Cancer is happening from not accepting some basic disillusionment and grief that something isn't what we thought it was. It's not just content that's happening in the moment. Sometimes this is like inner child stuff that's like a wound, and then we're playing it out. This is like such a common thing inside of like dysfunctional romantic relationships. There's like an inner child wound that's being played out. And the fight is not just with the partner and the situation, it's with the parental failure or something like that hasn't been fully grieved and felt and accepted in such a way that it creates lucidity and empowerment in the situation. It's like we attract an archetypal person similar to the wound to try to play it out and have a different result. Try to change the story in a magical way. So I'm thinking that this might be where the transit is the most savage, or is savage in a way, emotionally savage, that not only does Mars in Cancer press a sensitive point, but it also brings us to face our own spiritual maturation process, Saturn in Pisces, where it's like, yes, this hurts, and what are you going to do about it? Not just at a superficial level, but like really, what is the deeper invitation? And as I was saying earlier, it's not about the surface irritation necessarily, the person, the squabble, the power dynamic in a relationship, but the entire internal matrix that's holding it up in the first place. If we're in fantasy and resisting some deeper truth in our reality, then we're avoiding feeling something. And then this is likely at the root of the various dramas that we are engaged in, where we don't feel adequately cared for. We do not feel, or, that we don't feel our care for others is working to change them in the ways that we think they should change, that we're not able to nurture them into our ideal, right? And that or we feel neglected and abandoned in some way in life. I'm going to pivot again on this theme. These things are all related, but I'm going to leave it. So, that energetic about how you might like finally receive something that you've dreamed of, that you want so badly, and the way that it kind of comes to you or kind of clicks in a deeper level of havingness or security when you let go, when you're not gripping anymore. How people maybe find their life partner after they've like stopped gripping onto the search, or people receive the public validation and recognition, the invite to speak, whatever it is, after they've let go of the need to be validated in that way. It's an interesting energetic, right? Because it's like, why couldn't you give me this when I wanted it? When I wanted it so bad. But I think it's actually, there's something very kind about this energetic from life or spirit or God, however you look at it. And this is what I think it is. When we use, right? And I mean use in like the degrading kind of way. When we use a big dream that is actually in many ways true, right? It's true to our nature, the dream. It's our capacity for amazing love, right? It's our legacy or something like that. When we use that dream to mask something internally that we don't want to feel, we limit ourselves in how deep we can actually be in relationship to that dream. We're using the dream for something it's not designed to do, right? Would you rather be related to by someone that was like open to you, curious to get to know you, like desirous to have experiences with you, to collaborate? Or would you want to be with someone that wanted to like use you as a band-aid for their existential pain? Right? Like, even if you like playing that rescuer kind of role, and that's like that lens of romance of like saving someone in that way, it's really hard to actually feel actually seen or connected to or related to if someone's casting you in that role of savior. So think about that from the context of the dream. Yet a wounded part of us truly believes, right? Or an immature part of us truly believes that the dream will save us from something that we have already disavowed ourselves from, right? The dream is saving us from some deeper pains that make us unworthy, the places that we neglect and abandon ourselves, whatever we think is gross, cringe, unlovable, you should just get over it, like all of those things. Like when we're just like, yeah, nah, like fuck that. I don't want to look at that, but I'm like lusting over this big dream that is going to redeem me of those things. Our dream, I don't think it was designed to rescue us from having human emotions and feeling deeply and sometimes sharply. The dream is not a band-aid, and I think it refuses itself to be used as one. I know this is a big reach, and I hope you're following me, but what if the ways that we're basically fighting and protesting reality and fighting our own inner world and inner experience, disavowing ourselves from ourselves, and the subsequent illusion that that's creating in our life, right? By surfacing our disowned internal content through our various confrontations in the world, our various disappointments, arguments, relationship conflicts, what's lacking, relational dramas, all of this. What if this transit is helping us pop those bubbles right now? Of like Mars and Cancer pointing to those tender, sensitive spots that we would really rather avoid and have developed mechanisms to avoid. And then Saturn and Pisces being like, this is the end of the line. Like, this is the wall of your delusion. Not a pleasant experience in practice of being disillusioned, right? Or realizing that it was your inner child that was putting on rose tinted glasses and thought something about a situation, but actually that wasn't what was really happening. And the situation was just a cipher, a distorted mirror for you to contact that internal element of yourself. Like, these things are difficult. Um, but what if there is some deeper medicine in it that can be trusted, right? Like that contacting our deeper self is more important than avoiding it. So the trine between Mars and Saturn isn't easy feeling, but I think it's emotionally productive, especially as we are willing to lean into the material and take adequate and deeper levels of responsibility for meeting ourselves inside of what is being contacted, what's arising, as opposed to deflecting the material onto the irritating or challenging or disillusioning situation itself. Right? Peel it a layer deeper spiritually. Go a little deeper internally. So that's what I have for you. I forgot to talk about, we're getting close to the start date of the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive. It begins October 8th. I'm really pleased at the enrollment right now, and like the applications and whatnot. It's just, I've been kind of in like vacation mode. I've had people visiting. I've been like, I need to get out here and talk about it, but it's great that a lot of you seem to know about it. And maybe you came to Tender Desire, which is my last Pluto class that I gave that's on this YouTube channel. But this is an opportunity to go deep into evolutionary astrology. You know from watching these videos that I always approach things through this kind of depth lens, to really get to know the energies of these archetypes and planets, to learn the tools to put things together in terms of aspects, to read the natal chart as a whole, and the natal chart as a whole from the perspective of a soul on a multi-lifetime journey, where this life is your curriculum. You are evolving through the experiences that you are having in this life, that this incarnation is important, that it's relevant to a deeper arc of learning that you're on. And to really reflect deeply on this material, who you are as a soul, right? To learn a wisdom school tradition, to learn an astrology language that supports you, right? Because the soul is like such a big concept, but this is like a technique and like all these different archetypes and elements and ways to look at the chart that lets you really develop a vocabulary at a deeper level about your experience as a soul, the nuances of your deeper soul current. That's what the course is going for. It is a beloved course. I've been teaching it since 2018. It's had a really big impact on my students. You can read some student testimonials for an example of that on the course page, which I'm linking in the notes. The course page is also where you can read about it, the logistics. It is a 5-month course. And the application for the course is on that page. I still have a little bit of space for people to join. So I encourage you, if you're feeling called to go deeper into astrology inside of, container where not only the teachings themselves, I think, are really compelling and really opening, but there's so much opportunity in the class to connect with one another, with a really stellar, sincere, deep, magical cohort of people, and also to receive mentorship from me in the way that I really care about getting to know my students, reflecting you back to you, connecting things in your chart to what you share in class, that this happens in class. It also happens in the forum connected to class. So this is a perfect way to learn astrology if it's really important for you to be in dialogue. It's not just like a self-study course where you're in your own world. It is a community experience. There is conversation. I think that's really important because, I'm at a place with my own, like, astrology's anchored in me that I can learn myself. I can learn from workshops I go to and just absorb privately. But my biggest breakthroughs in actually feeling like I could be fluent in astrology happened because I had mentors, teachers, community, people that I was talking about it with. That made all the difference. So that really influences how I teach, as well as some of my most cherished experiences in grad school, the teachers that lit me up and inspired me the most and made me feel like something was happening when I came to class, that like we were really having a cosmic experience. I've been influenced by those beloved teachers also. I'm really excited about the class. It's going to be a gorgeous experience. If you want in on it this round, do check out the course page and apply. And of course, please leave a comment, like this video, subscribe to my channel. I really enjoyed sharing this with you today. And yeah, I hope that it's helpful for the experiences that you're having. Sending you so much love.